Mince is the most purchased protein in Australia. It is in your spag bowl, your tacos, your meat pies, your kid's favorite Tuesday night dinner. You have bought it 100 times without thinking twice. Maybe you grab whatever is on special. Maybe you always pick up the same brand from the same store. Maybe you genuinely believe that a package of mince is just a package of mince. It is not. When we tested 7 of the biggest grocery chains selling mince to Australian families right now, most of them failed. Not on taste, not on price, on what is actually inside the package. What we found behind the label, behind that reassuring bright red color under the plastic wrap, and behind the lean percentage printed in friendly numbers on the front, will make you think twice the next time you reach for the tray. Let me tell you what started this. A few months ago, a viewer sent me a message. She had been buying the same brand of regular mince from the same store for years. Same package, same label, same price, give or take. But something had changed. The pan was filling up with liquid every single time she cooked it. More than she remembered. The mince was shrinking down to almost nothing. She thought she was imagining it. She was not. We started pulling data. And what we found is that mince in Australia is operating inside one of the loosest labeling frameworks of any food product on the shelf. While you have been watching egg prices and bread prices and fuel prices, mince has been running its own quiet operation. Prices have crept up. Package sizes have quietly come down. And what is inside those packages and the actual composition of the meat you are feeding your family has drifted in ways the label does not have to tell you about. The average Australian household spends somewhere between $500 and $800 a year on mince alone. That is not a rounding error. That is a grocery budget line that deserves the same scrutiny we give to anything else we spend that kind of money on. So we built a test. 7 stores, 1 mission. Figure out who is actually giving you what they say they are and who is quietly betting that you will never notice the difference. Costco, Coles, Woolworths, Aldi, IGA, Drake's supermarkets, and a single location independent butcher we are calling the control. And I will tell you right now, before we get into the results, some of what we found made me genuinely angry. Not surprised, because nothing surprises me anymore, but angry. There is a difference. Before we get to the rankings, you need to understand what mince actually is, because most people are working from a mental image that stopped being accurate a long time ago. Here's what you picture: a butcher, a counter, some cuts of beef going into a grinder. Clean, simple, accountable. Here's what actually happens at industrial scale. Large processing facilities source what the industry calls trim. Trim is exactly what it sounds like. It is the material left over after prime cuts are removed from the carcass. Scraps from the chuck, the round, the brisket, the plate. Some of that trim is decent quality. A lot of it is not. It comes from multiple animals, often sourced from multiple states or multiple countries, combined into a single batch, and ground into the uniform pink product that sits under the plastic wrap at your supermarket. That is what you are looking at. A blend of scraps from animals you will never be able to trace. Processed in a facility you will never visit, packaged to look like something simpler than it is. Now here is where it gets worse. In Australia, mince fat content is regulated under FSANZ, Food Standards, Australia, New Zealand. The categories work like this. Extra lean must be under 10% fat, lean under 17, regular up to 30. Sounds like a real system. Here is the problem. Compliance testing does not happen at retail level on every batch. It happens at the processing level, on samples, periodically. The package in your fridge right now has never been individually tested. You are trusting an averaging system applied to an industrial process. Those are 2 very different things. And here's something most people do not know. Australian food law allows a fat content tolerance of plus or minus 3 percentage points on labeled mince. That means a package telling you it is 17% fat can legally test at 20% before any regulatory action is triggered. You bought lean mince. You got something closer to regular. Both are completely legal. Then there is the water problem. Mince naturally releases some moisture when cooked. That is normal. What is not normal is the volume some industrial products release. Certain processing operations add water during grinding to improve texture and increase yield. This is completely legal. There is no labeling requirement to disclose it below a certain threshold. That liquid filling your pan is not all rendered fat. Some of it is water you paid beef prices for. Think about that the next time you drain the pan. The color of your mince is not information. It is marketing. Fresh mince is naturally a deep purplish red. It turns bright red when exposed to oxygen. Retailers know this. Some use modified atmosphere packaging, pumping specific gases into the sealed tray to keep the mince looking vivid, long past the point where it would naturally oxidize. The mince looks fresh. It may not be. The color on the surface of that package is managed. It is not a freshness indicator. And the Product of Australia label does not mean what most Australians think it means. For a product to carry the Product of Australia claim under current ACCC guidelines, all significant ingredients must be Australian, and all processing must occur in Australia. For mince, that means the cattle must be Australian. That part, at least, is tighter than the equivalent rule in many other countries. But here's what the label does not tell you. It does not tell you how those cattle were raised, what they were fed, what the trim composition looks like, or how many animals ended up in your batch. Product of Australia tells you where the cow was born and where it was ground. It tells you nothing about what grade of trim went into the machine. Some brands use this label on products sourced from cattle operations that bear almost no resemblance to the sun-drenched paddock imagery on the front of the package. The label is accurate, the implication is not. All right, let us get into it. 7 stores. Here's the list. Costco, Coles, Woolworths, Aldi, IGA, Drake's Supermarkets, and the Independent Butcher Control. For each store, we purchase the regular mince, the most commonly purchased fat category in Australia, in the largest standard package available. We also purchased lean mince from each store where it was available under a store brand or private label. We ran 4 tests on every sample. Test 1, the cook-down weight test. We weighed every package before cooking. We cooked each sample identically. Same pan, same heat, same time, same portion size. We weighed the cooked result. The difference between raw weight and cooked weight tells you how much of what you paid for actually ended up as food. Test 2, the render test. We collected and measured the liquid released during cooking in a clear container. We let it separate. Fat floats. Water sinks. The ratio of fat to water in that render tells you a great deal about how the mince was processed and whether water was added before packaging. Test 3, the color and oxidation check. We opened each package and photographed the interior color, not the surface. Surface color is managed. Interior color is closer to reality. Test 4, the label accuracy cross-reference. We sent samples from 4 of the 7 stores to an independent food testing laboratory for basic nutritional composition analysis and compared those results to what the label claimed. I want to be clear about something. We are not a government agency. We are not FSANZ. This is not a peer-reviewed study. But the methodology is consistent, the sample sizes are real, and the lab results are real. What we found is directionally accurate, and I stand behind every word of it. All right, let us get into the results. 3 stores in our test fell into what I am calling the failure category. These are the stores where the gap between what the label says and what we actually found was significant enough that I would not feel comfortable buying mince there without knowing what I now know. Coles. Let us start here because this one needs context. Coles is not a discount chain. Coles is one of the 2 dominant players in Australian grocery retail. They control somewhere between 30 and 35% of total grocery market share. They have a marketing budget that positions them as the friendly neighborhood supermarket, the place where good things are happening. The regular mince we purchased from Coles showed the highest render volume of the major chains in our test. When we cooked a standard 250-gram portion and collected the liquid, we measured over 85 milliliters of combined fat and water. When we let that liquid separate, the ratio was not predominantly fat, which you would expect from regular mince at up to 30% fat content. It was closer to even. The water proportion was significant. The lab results from the Coles sample showed protein levels measurably below what the label implied for regular mince. Not catastrophically below, but below. The cook-down loss was 36%. You are buying a package that loses more than a third of its raw weight before it reaches the plate. Coles lean mince, labeled as lean, came back from the lab above the lean fat threshold by a margin that sits right at the edge of regulatory tolerance. It is technically within spec. It is not what most consumers think they are buying. The packaging, by the way, is excellent. Bright colors, friendly font, paddock imagery. The marketing budget and the sourcing budget appear to be inversely correlated. Now let us talk about the other half of the duopoly. Woolworths controls a similar slice of the Australian grocery market to Coles. Together, these 2 chains account for somewhere between 60 and 65% of all grocery spending in this country. That is not a competitive market. That is a duopoly with a loyalty card attached. The Woolworths result was different from Coles, but not better. Where Coles failed primarily on render volume and water content, Woolworths failed on something more insidious: internal consistency between products in the same range. The standard Woolworths regular mince performed acceptably on the cook-down test. Cook-down loss was 28%. Still significant, but within a range that suggests reasonable processing. The render ratio leaned fat-heavy in the way you would expect from genuine regular mince. On that single metric, Woolworths regular passed. The problem was the Woolworths Select. Woolworths Select is their in-house economy range. It is positioned as a value option, same quality standards, better price point. That is the implication. The package is clean and professional. The label says Select like it means something premium. Cook-down loss on the Woolworths. Select regular mince, 41%. You read that correctly. 41% of the raw weight was gone before the meat reached the plate. That is not a fat content issue, that is a processing issue. The render test on the Select mince showed a water proportion that was materially higher than the standard Woolworths mince from the same store. Same brand family, same store. The economy sub-label appears to carry different processing standards than the main label, and those processing standards show up clearly in a pan. We also found something on the internal color check that we want to flag carefully because we do not have lab confirmation on this one. Multiple packages of Woolworths Select mince showed a grayish interior color that, in our previous testing experience, is associated with product that has been held longer or reworked through the process. We are not making a safety claim. We are making an observation that this is not what fresh processed mince typically looks like on the inside of the package. Lab results on the Woolworths standard mince came back within label tolerance. Lab results on the Select mince showed protein levels below what we would expect for the category and fat content at the upper edge of the labeled range. If you are shopping at Woolworths, the main label mince is not great, but it is defensible. The Select range showed enough variation in our test that I would avoid it entirely. One more thing. Woolworths has a marketing campaign that specifically talks about their beef supply chain and their Australian farming partnerships. We are not disputing any of that. The cattle may well come from exactly the farms they claim. But the quality of the raw material going into the grinder and the quality of the processing after that are two different things. And the second one is where Woolworths Select let itself down badly. IGA is the wild card in this test, and the result here is the one that genuinely surprised us. IGA is not a single chain in the way Coles and Woolworths are. It is a franchise network, independent retailers operating under a shared banner and a shared supply agreement. The quality variance between IGA stores is significant, much wider than you see in the centralized chains. What we are reporting here reflects what we purchased from the specific IGA location we tested. It may not represent every IGA in Australia. We want to be clear about that. With that caveat stated, the IGA mince we purchased was the worst performing product in our entire test. Cook-down loss, 44%. Nearly half of the raw weight disappeared in the pan. The render test was notable for the sheer volume of liquid, more total liquid than any other product in the test, and the water-to-fat ratio suggested significant added moisture. The internal color on opening was the most pronounced gray we observed across the entire test, not a trace of the deep purplish red that indicates fresh processing. Gray throughout, front to back. The label on the IGA mince we purchased listed regular fat content and carried no information about sourcing beyond a general Australian beef claim. The lab results came back with protein content below the floor, for regular mince and fat content slightly above the labeled maximum. This product did not pass the basic label accuracy check. Now, here is the important context. The IGA network is at the mercy of their supply agreements, which are more variable than the centralized procurement operations at Coles and Woolworths. A small independent IGA store does not have the buying power to demand the same consistency of supply that a chain with 3,000 locations does. The fault here may not be the store. The fault may be what the supply chain delivers to independent retailers when the better product is being allocated to the major chains. That is actually a structural problem worth naming. The customers who tend to shop at independent IGA stores, often in regional areas, often without easy access to alternative options, are in this test receiving materially worse product than customers in metro areas who have a Coles or a Woolworths nearby. The grocery duopoly extracts better supply terms and better product, and the people at the end of the chain get whatever is left. I am not being dramatic. That is what our results suggest. 2 stores in our test landed in what I am calling the middle. Not good enough to recommend without caveats, not bad enough to call failures. Drake's Supermarkets. Drake's is an interesting case. It is the largest independently owned supermarket chain in Australia, operating predominantly in South Australia and Queensland. Unlike the IGA network, Drake's is vertically integrated. They own their own distribution and have real purchasing leverage with suppliers. That independence shows up in the product. The Drake's mince we purchased performed better than any of the major chain products on the cook-down test. Cook-down loss was 22%, the lowest of any packaged retail product in our test. The render ratio was fat-heavy in the way you would expect from genuinely processed mince without significant water addition. Where Drake's fell short was on label accuracy. The lab results came back with fat content slightly higher than labeled, Not outside regulatory tolerance, but not right on the label either. And the protein level, while acceptable, suggested a trim composition that leaned towards secondary cuts rather than the leaner muscle meat that tends to come from better procurement. The internal color was acceptable. Not butcher quality, but meaningfully better than the IGA and Woolworths Select samples. The verdict on Drake's, better than the duopoly at the cookdown level, honest on water content, slightly off on label precision. If you are in South Australia or Queensland and Drake's is your local option, you are doing better than most Australians without even knowing it. Aldi. Aldi is the surprise result that will make some people very happy and others very defensive. The Aldi mince we purchased, their Gindura Station regular mince, came back with a cookdown loss of 24%. Render ratio was appropriate for the fat category. Internal color was a reasonable deep red. Lab results came back within label tolerance on both fat and protein. There is a reason for this, and it is worth understanding. Aldi operates on an extremely tight supplier model. They typically have one supplier per category per region, and they demand significant consistency from that supplier. Because they have no buffer, they cannot rotate between 6 different suppliers and average out the variance. Their quality control incentive structure is actually more aligned with the consumer than a chain that can substitute suppliers without shoppers noticing. The Aldi mince is not premium. The packaging is no nonsense. The store experience is not Coles beautiful, but the product in the bag is more honest than what you will find in a better-looking package at the major chains, and it costs less per kilogram. If you are not already buying Aldi mince, this result will probably change that. 2 stores in our test actually delivered what they said they were selling. Costco, second place. Costco mince is sold in bulk. The smallest package available at Costco is significantly larger than a standard retail package at Coles or Woolworths, and the price per kilogram reflects genuine bulk purchasing economics rather than a manufactured value illusion. Cookdown loss on the Costco regular mince, 19%. The lowest packaged retail result in our entire test. The render was almost entirely fat. Very little water separation, which means what you are cooking is essentially the product as described. The internal color was a deep, consistent red throughout the package with no gray areas. Lab results came back clean. Fat content within 2 percentage points of label. Protein content at the upper end of expected range for the category, which indicates a better trim composition going into the grinder. The honest caveat with Costco is accessibility. Not everyone lives near a Costco. Not everyone has space in their freezer for a 2-kilogram package of mince. The membership fee changes the maths if you shop there rarely. But on pure product quality, the Costco mince is significantly better than anything the major chains are offering. There's also something worth noting about why Costco performs well here. Costco's entire business model is built on membership revenue, not retail margin. They have almost no incentive to cut corners on product quality because the product quality is the reason you renew your membership. Their alignment with the consumer is structural, not charitable. They make money when you trust them, so they produce products you can trust. That is a different incentive than a supermarket chain that makes money when you do not read the label. Independent butcher, first place. This is not a surprise, and it should not be. The independent butcher we used as our control, a single-site operation with no franchise relationship and a display counter you can see from the door, produced mince with a cookdown loss of 14%. 14. When you compare that to 44% at IGA, you are looking at 3 times the food actually landing on the plate from the same raw weight of product. The render was clean. The color was deep and consistent. The trim composition was visibly different. You can actually see the quality in the raw product before it ever hits the pan. The lab results showed protein content that was genuinely elevated above any packaged retail product we tested, and fat content exactly at label. The price per kilogram at the independent butcher was higher than Aldi and Drake's. It was comparable to, and in some cases lower than, the Coles and Woolworths mince once you account for a cookdown loss. And that is the number that should stop you in your tracks. Here is the thing that is going to completely change how you think about the price tag on mince. Most Australians make their supermarket decision based on the sticker price per kilogram. That is the number that goes into the mental calculation. $4.99 versus $6.99. The cheaper one wins. That is rational behavior if the sticker price is the real price. It is not. The real price is the cost of the food that actually ends up cooked and edible on your plate. Let me show you what that looks like with round numbers. Take the Coles regular mince. Let us say it is $6 per kilogram. You cook 500 grams. Cookdown loss is 36%. You end up with 320 grams of cooked product. Your effective cost per gram of cooked product is roughly 1.87 cents. Now take the independent butcher mince. It is $8.50 per kilogram, 42% more expensive on the sticker. You cook 500 grams? Cookdown loss is 14%. You end up with 430 grams of cooked product. Your effective cost per gram of cooked product is roughly 99 cents per gram, actually less than the Coles mince despite the higher sticker price. The cheap mince is the expensive mince. The expensive mince is the cheap mince. The entire pricing perception is inverted once you account for what you are actually buying. And this is not a marginal difference. This is a 44% IGA product sitting at the same sticker price as the independent butcher and delivering less than a third of the cooked food per raw kilogram. The consumer in that situation is being structurally deceived by a pricing system that makes no reference to the only number that actually matters. The number that matters is how much protein lands on the plate per dollar spent. We did that calculation across all 7 stores. The result ranked from best to worst value on a per cooked gram basis. Independent butcher, Aldi, Costco, Drake's, Woolworths Standard, Coles, Woolworths Select, IGA. Read that list again. The bottom of the value ranking are the 2 stores that most Australians walk into every single week, assuming they're getting a fair deal. Let me be very precise about this section because I do not want to be accused of claiming something I cannot prove. FSANZ food standards. Australia, New Zealand sets the standards. They write the rules about what can be in food, how it must be labeled, and what tolerances are permissible. The standards are publicly available. They are more detailed than most consumers realize. The fat content tolerance I mentioned earlier, 3 percentage points, is real. It is documented in the standards, and it was not hidden from anyone. It is just that no one ever told you about it in plain language. The ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, handles misleading conduct and false representations. If a product systematically misrepresents its fat content beyond the tolerance window, that is potentially an ACCC matter. If a marketing campaign makes claims that a reasonable consumer would interpret as meaning something materially different from what the product delivers, that is potentially an ACCC matter. Our lab results showed products operating within the tolerance window on fat content. The Woolworths Select and IGA samples pushed against that window, but neither exceeded it in a way that would clearly trigger regulatory action under current standards. Here is the structural problem. The ACCC and FSANZ are reactive institutions. They investigate complaints. They respond to referrals. They do not conduct ongoing random sampling of retail mince at the volume that would catch the kind of variance we found in a test of 7 stores. The practical reality is this. The regulation that protects the consumer is the regulation the consumer enforces themselves. When you know what to look for, cookdown loss, render ratio, interior color, you are applying a quality test that is more real than anything happening in the regulatory environment around you. We have submitted a summary of our findings to FSANZ as a formal consumer report. We do not expect rapid action. We think transparency is the mechanism, not regulation, which is why we made this video. 3 rules. That is all you need. After everything in this video, I want to give you 3 things you can actually do next time you are standing in front of the mince section. Rule 1. Stop buying the cheapest option at Coles or Woolworths and calling it a saving. The maths does not work in your favor. You have now seen the cookdown loss numbers. The sticker price is not the food price. If you are buying from the major chains, you are paying for water and processing waste. If budget is the primary driver, Aldi is your answer. Better product, lower sticker, and the cookdown numbers mean you are genuinely spending less to get the same meal on the table. Rule 2. Learn to read the render. The first time you cook a new brand of mince, collect the liquid. You do not need lab equipment. Put the liquid in a clear glass and let it sit for 5 minutes. Fat floats. It will be a yellow-orange layer on top. Water sinks. It will be a pale red layer below. If the water layer is equal to or greater than the fat layer, you are looking at mince that has been processed with significant added moisture. You paid beef prices for that water. Now you know. Rule 3. Find your local butcher and price it properly. I know the price tag looks higher. I know the major chains have made convenience and priced the 2 things you think about when you buy meat. Run the cook-down comparison yourself, at home with your own pans, against whatever you are currently buying. The butcher mince will very likely cost you the same per cooked gram or less, and you will be eating better food. Try it once. Do the maths. Then make your own decision. Those are the 3 rules. They cost you nothing except a bit of attention. I want to be honest about something before I let you go. I did not always know any of this. For most of my adult life, I bought whatever mince was on special at the Woolworths closest to my house. I did not think about cookdown loss. I did not think about render ratios. I did not think about what was actually inside the modified atmosphere packaging. I cooked the mince, drained the pan, and assumed that the label on the front was a fair description of what I was eating. A lot of you are in the same position I was, and I am not standing here to judge that. The system is designed to keep you uninformed. The labeling is designed to communicate just enough to feel transparent while hiding the things that would change your behavior if you understood them. The marketing is designed to make you feel good about a product that the production economics would make you feel very differently about. I made this video because I got angry. Not performing for the camera angry. Actually angry. The kind of angry you get when you realize you have been misled for years about something mundane, something you buy every single week, something that goes into your family's dinner. The kind of angry that makes you spend 3 months and real money on lab testing to build a case that is hard to dismiss. If you came here for a tidy verdict and a shopping list, I hope I gave you that. But I also want you to feel something, because feeling something is what makes you remember it the next time you are in the mince aisle. You deserve to know what you are actually buying. That is the whole point of this channel. Next video in this series, chicken. Specifically, chicken breast. The most consumed protein in Australian households, the one product that has seen the most dramatic processing evolution in the past decade. The one where the gap between what the label says and what is actually in the bag may be even wider than what we found in this mince test. We are going to look at the weight gain process, the injection and tumbling operations used to increase yield on chicken breast before packaging. We are going to look at what is injected, how it is labeled, and what it means for the protein content per dollar you think you are spending. We are going to look at the retained water test, same cook-down methodology you saw today, across the same stores. And we are going to look at something specific to the chicken supply chain in Australia that almost nobody talks about publicly. Something that connects the retail price of chicken breast to a supply chain consolidation story that is worth understanding. If you want to be notified when that video drops, subscribe. Not as a favor to me, because that video is going to change how you think about the most common protein in your fridge. I will see you in it.